expand your network for looking for early stage investors. So that's fascinating. So now let's get into talking about good practices, right? Good practices that companies should have in the early stages. This is going to be a very tough one for you to answer because you could at this point probably write a book on it. So you'll have to summarize it. In your opinion, what are 3 practices of good startups at the early stage?
Early stage, yeah. So if you have a product that's semi-working, like you have some people using it, and so they become the drivers. Like for example, they want certain features and they want you to take the product in this way or this way. So sometimes you have to learn to say no, because sometimes you have to have a vision as well how the product should evolve. And so you don't want to become a consulting company, especially early stages of a company when you don't know what the product is. So that balance is actually really hard. The early stage for us, Netflix, our big customer, they were one of the early customers as well. So they were they were willing to pay us a lot of upfront cash upfront to actually work on certain features. But some of them aligned with what we wanted to build, but some of them did make sense for some of the other bigger, like a smaller customers, because Netflix had a bigger, large engineering team. So it's a balancing, and we did say no for certain things. So, but we still kept them as customers. So it's just finding that balance. So learning to say no is actually very important for a startup founder. It just because you get so much opportunity once you have something that's working. Actually, learning to say no is actually important. Second is I would say hiring. I mean, once you get to a stage, now you have to start bringing in talent to actually hire to, move your company forward. So having a good process, having a way to screen talent helps. Otherwise, what happens if you don't bring the right set of talent? I mean, the way we approach it is we want to have somebody who's smarter than us to that team. So the way I screen for it, I want to find somebody who will be like I'm amazed by, or he or she's smarter than I am. Then I'm going to, so you want to find like a bar racer, because that's where then the next person he or she brings in will be even smarter than them, right? So that's how you keep your company going in terms of bringing those talent, and because that definitely helps. Because if you bring the right talent, like luckily for us, we were able to convince our first engineer was actually our classmates from Waterloo again, and he was again working at Amazon, and well-paid job. So convincing them to join a startup, making small amount of money in the valley, it was a lot of work just to convince them, right? So that's just convincing people to join your company. That's kind of the way hiring works. Third one, I'm trying to think through like.
So let me ask you this. It's interesting that you say that. So because I'm sure that there are some people on this call that want to work for a startup. They may not necessarily want to be a part of the founding team, but they want to be employed by a startup. What is when you were looking at hiring people, what was that one magic quantity that you were looking for? And entrepreneurs that I've spoken to earlier. Actually, I heard that smarter than me quite often. That's very interesting that you said that. I've also heard people say, I need someone who takes initiative, because a startup is completely about being self-driven. So was there a sort of like, I know that there are probably 50 criteria that you were looking for, but was there one magic quality?
Yeah, that one is actually, they have to care. Like even if they don't have a skill set, they have to just care about what they work on. So they have to, it's the passion. You look for that passion. If they don't have that passion, everything else just falls off the cliff. If they have the passion, they can actually ramp up skills, and they'll learn things. They'll put in the time to actually learn those skills. But without passion, it doesn't happen. It doesn't work. So I look for a certain, especially with passion. Like they need to care. They need to care about whatever their job or this, anything that they do, they need to care and deeply involved in. So it's hard to test for that. So yeah, but that's the clear skill. Like once I find it, then I know, okay, that's the mark you should aim for.
Great. So let's talk about fundraising. And at this point, let's just say here that we're people of color, right? So it's not like we have a ton of people that we know that have trust funds. So of course, you're going out and you're looking for angel investments in a very interesting audience. And maybe that's changed over the last couple of years, but I would imagine back when the company started, that was a lot harder. So reflecting back on PagerDuty's early days, what key things do you think that a company should have that attracts funding, that reduces the resistance on that front?
Yeah, so a good product that's actually loved by your customer is probably the number one thing you could have in terms of. But if you're not, if you're early stage, you might not have a product. So that's it's based on your skill set or some traction you want to build, right? So, so I would say having a early product, at least having a MVP that have positive traction, and then investors are they're not like. It's good to have that momentum. So you find somebody who will write you a smaller check. So these are tactics that people use. So you don't have to convince them to write you a big check, but they'll just $1,000 check. But as you could put them, okay, I'm going to use you as a name. And the way investors work, they always their mentalities are fear of missing out on things. So FOMO. So once they realize that somebody invested, they'll just jump in. So I mean, the early days of PagerDuty, like. Because when James Lindemann, the founder of Heroku, and all the founders invested, James is a well-known figure in the I guess operations space, and so everyone else jumped in terms of giving us money, right? Because so investors like because sometimes they don't have the time, like they see so many deals every day, they don't have the bandwidth to look at every startup, understand every market, right? So they just look for signals, and signals are like. So I would just convince people who are trying to raise money, find somebody who's, who is an authority in that space, and just ask for a smaller check size, right? And convince them to, invest in not in the company, but in you. So that's kind of the way you sell you as a person, right? So, and your skill set. So it's a small investment for them, but it has a big impact on their side of things, right? So yeah, so that's one idea.
That is so clever. I love the idea that you're dangling a carrot, and FOMO is a thing. It's a real thing, and I can understand that busy people just don't have the time to do all the detailed analysis on a particular piece. Now, I look around, and when I look at founding teams, or even entire startup teams, people just seem quite exhausted. It's not the easiest journey. Sometimes I think that someone who's worked 10 years at a startup has worked 20 years at a real company, right? So I want people listening to this to really be prepared for what they're going to be doing or already in. Talk to me about burnout, and how do you suggest people manage burnout?
Yeah, so before you even get into it, it's going to be a 10-year journey for us. It was 10 years, and typically startups are like 8 to 10 years if you wanted to get to a pretty good success. And burnout is real. Like it's because it's the amount of stress you go through from the beginning. It's the most stressful thing you will ever do if you as a person. I would say it's just building a startup. So luckily for me, I had my wife to support me. And then my family, I could just bounce off them. Irony has been like my dumping ground in terms of if you get stressed out, you go home and you just dump all your stress and just take all the blunt of all the stress, right? So having somebody in your network to help you out, definitely you should have mentors to talk to. Mental health is important, especially for startup founders, because so many, you get through highs and lows, and it's just having you should be mindful about it, that you could actually get into these states where sometimes you get into a state where you might not care anymore, and that's actually it's a sign for burnout. So it is real, and so some people get through it pretty fast, and some people don't get to it at all, like Elon Musk. I don't know how, as a person, like some people are just built for just building stuff, right? Some people have their limits. So finding your limits where you are, and then taking breaks. I didn't take any vacation for early stages of this company. I guess it was just chance, right? We had so many things to do. The company was growing, so it's harder to take those. But you do need to think about taking some break and actually spending time with family and so on. So finding people in your support network. I mean, it is real. So it's a real problem, especially it will get worse if your startup is actually going into a tougher time where you're running out of cash, and and you have so many, you have to make payroll and things like that. So it's very stressful. But having people in your mentorship network or somebody, so you find mentors, just find mentors ahead of time so that you could actually just talk to them when you go through the process. So again, YC, this is why YC House. YC has this program called Office Hours. They actually set up these YC members to actually talk to each other or talk to people in the YC network, because it's a problem.
And you know what? I would imagine having co-founders is also a bit of a relief because you have someone to bounce these ideas off of. Sorry, that just brought back like a bad memory for me, because this is the only thing I will share about myself personally is, you know, when I was going through that startup journey, I used to work really late at night and take the late night bus at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. alone up all the way back to where I lived. And I don't think people understand. And then what I would do, or sometimes I would just sleep in the office at 3 o'clock, wake up at 7 o'clock and keep working. And that's what everyone did, right? When we were really small. I don't want people listening to this to underestimate the amount of work that goes into it. So prepare yourself for the long haul. I agree. I don't think that a journey, when we hear that it's 3 years, it's really rare. It's more like it's 10 years, right?
Yeah, it's 10 years.
So it's interesting for me to hear you say that this has been the most stressful thing that you've done, but at the same time, you're doing it again, right? So talk to me about what you're doing now, because you're baking, you're taking something out of the oven, you're baking a new startup.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always a builder, so I like to build things. So just taking a backseat, I mean, if you think about software as a medium, just going back, 1400, when the printing press was invented, the world's literacy rate was pretty low. Now printing press made it so that everyone could actually learn, read and write, because books became accessible. And I think we're at about 85% literacy rate in the planet, which is a tremendous achievement. If you go back 1,000 years, that wasn't the case. Software is the next medium. It's kind of the next evolution, where now book is a way to pass knowledge. So it's a way to write knowledge and pass it to generations. Software is another level up, where you actually now pass not just knowledge, but also now a machine to build machines. So the way you think about it, because everything now is becoming software driven. So 3D printing makes it so you can actually print devices and manufacture parts using software. Same thing's happening in biology. Now software is the critical component that actually passes the knowledge into the future. So the unfortunate thing is there's about only 50 million people who could actually write software on the planet right now, out of 8 billion people. So that's less than 1%. And so to sustain that going forward, it's not going to work. So it's going to have the haves and the not haves. So how do you make that more accessible, right? So building software, making it easy, accessible, that's kind of the next evolution. So how do you make it so at least 10% of the world's population could actually build software for whatever the problems they solve? I mean, it could be in biotech or whatever. And so how do you get to that stage? That's kind of the tinkering behind it. So we've been tinkering away with how to build like this. So we started with automation as the first step. So anyone could take, so Excel is an example of a product that's a lot of people, but Excel is actually also, you could say, is a programming language. So how do you take something like Excel to the next level? So what are the set of tools you need to actually bring, so anyone become automated? So they could automate some of the mundane things they do on a regular basis, so they could focus on the most creative aspect of their life, right? So right now we're focused on security operations. So this is where if you go to a company, there'll be a lot of people, there'll be a team of people responsible for triaging like phishing attacks, virus, malware infection, and they're overwhelmed with so much requests that they don't have enough people to handle. So what are the tools we need to build them so they could automate some of that process? So we are in that space right now. That's our the beachhead, we call it. So you want to land in a company with a certain solution, and then you can expand beyond that. So that's where we're building right now. So
amazing. Congratulations. I think it's incredible that you're starting something new again, especially because you're leveraging that knowledge. Like, why would you build a house and then not do it again, right? Now you're leveraging all of that knowledge, and hopefully it's going to mean an accelerated route, at least for you. So here's the exciting thing. We actually have a ton of questions that have come in for you, Baskar. I'm going to try to fit it into the next while. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time to people if I shorten your questions, because there's just people sent in multiple questions. So, okay, I'm going to start with, as flowing from what you just said about your new about your new company. This is a question from Travis. He's asking, why can't you just pour capital into your next company? Why do you still have to go through that whole, a product market fit rigmarole?
Yeah, I mean, the product, something has to be built so that the customer has value, like find value. So how do you, so the startup is kind of the process of finding that value, right? So if you just throw money at it, what happens is that it gets spent on things that are not value add and get burned away. But if you step back and actually find the root problem to solve. So in the space we are in, what are the challenges people are solving? These are the problems they're facing, and these are the tools they have right now, and it's not helping them because they are either hard to use, or they have to be trained. Training takes so long. So you're finding those things to actually iterate on and actually kind of build a product for. So that's what startups do. They find these problems and they search for like a solution, and they keep iterating until they find, okay, this could be now scaled. Okay, we found it for this customer, and now it can be scaled. And it applies to even, it's not just any startup, applies to big business as well. If you, for example, Google, when Google was launching Gmail, so this is one of those stories we hear at YC, Paul Buchheit is the creator of Gmail. So this is early 2000, where he just built a prototype. He wants, because he hated Outlook, he hated Yahoo Mail, he had all the other email tools. He wanted to build it for himself. And so he went to the management to, launch it with him internally. And the feedback he got was like, he has to go find 100 happy users within Google so that he could now launch it. They're willing to put the money in. Now he actually took them a while. He thought he would find it easily. And then when he went to talk to these people, they had this Outlook shortcut, works so much great for this phase in 5 minutes a day. And he finds all these small things that everyone has built into their product, like workflow, that actually harder to actually take them Outlook out of their process, right? So he has to spend more time figuring, and then until he found the 100th happy user within Google, then he became Gmail. But so even inside a company, it has this process has to happen. So it's not just for startups. Any small product, any product you want to build has to go through that process of search to find the right repeatable process to actually sell the product, basically.
Fair enough. There's a question that's come. There's one that just came in actually through chat. It's from Manjula Selvarajah. He says, this is a fascinating question. How did your parents feel about you leaving your well-paying, reputable job at Amazon to start your own company, and how did you manage those expectations?
Yeah, I think so. People in our culture have that mentality, right? So it's you have to buy in. You have to buy in from the parents. Yes, Amazon pays you, for those who don't have, like 6-figure salary with bonuses. So you'll be very well off if you work for Amazon. But there's a point in time in your life where you have a chance to take risk. So it's more like, so I was at that time I was single, and so it was a family decision. Like talk to my brother, this is the only time in our lifetime. Like, okay, we have a less burn. We don't have we don't have kids. We could actually take big risk, and that's kind of the selling point. Like, give me 2 years or 1 year of my life where I get to work on something that I care about. And luckily it worked out for me. But yeah, I'm pretty sure some of people have to go back to work, right? So I totally understand, but we have to figure out how to pool our capital together to people with these needs to help them. We need to nurture them. So the way I think about it, for young startup founders, keep your burn low, buy in from your family, and then just focus on that. So I don't spend waste time watching TV, on social media, things like that. I am just laser focused on building product and business, right? So yeah, you definitely need buy-in from your family, definitely.
Okay. My goodness, there's so many questions coming in here. I'm trying to sort of manage the situation here. I think that's a really great answer about really assessing risk and deciding when in your life you can do that, right? I think people need to kind of keep that journey ahead of them. There's this question from Viv, which is, how did your company succeed in going from 1 million of annual recurring revenues to 10 million in annual recurring revenues. By the way, that just sounds like a fabulous journey. But anyways, how did you guys do it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the first million was really hard to get to. Like it took a
Mm,
while.
imagine.
But then from 1 to 10, we figured out where our customers are coming from. So we were really spreading by word of mouth. So like a lot of our engineering. So basically, the way our product was sold, actually, going back to the basics, we sold directly to the end users. So if you're an engineer or engineering manager, you buy a product with your credit card, and then you expense it. And uh, the level of engagement we had. So we were so we still sold directly to the end users, and because that we spread kind of through word of mouth. So their engineers talk to their engineering friends. Hey, look, we use this product, and so on. So we actually were spreading by word of mouth. So now we figured out, okay, that's happening. We let's just add fuel to it. So what we did is we did some content marketing. So what we did is we found what the type of content those people were looking for, and we wrote special integration guides for our product, and then that drove like organic traffic to our website. And then with that, we had like 40% conversion rate. So it was like a high number for us. And so we just kept doubling down on that. And then we also added a sales team, internal, like an inside sales team. So we started calling people who are doing it. So they had a trial process. We had, they come in, sign up, try our product. And then during the trial process, we actually called them to find out what the problems they can solve and see what the value we could add. And that also helped draw that revenue to 10. Yeah, basically.
Amazing. There's another question from Gajan and Vitushan. Why did you choose to go with external investment versus organically growing? And if you could fold into that, when is the right time to seek investment?
Yeah, so especially in tech, where it's actually a winner take all market. So going back to the power law, right? So the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle, where 80% of the market is going to be dominated by one or two players. So in tech, that's true. And so to get to that point, you need capital. So you need to raise money to actually, you could just do it organically, but it'll take you longer. And if somebody sees you doing it, they will actually, take your product, copy it, and actually raise the money to and go after that market, which it happened recently in this. And so we, in our space, we raised the money, but we saw two of our competitors just clone our product, and they also had pretty good exits out of this because we defined the market, and now there's competitors come in with either cheaper offering or different takes on how to approach certain problems, and so competitors will come if you have a product that's working, that's solving real problems. You have to be ready for it. So raising money is a way to kind of accelerate your product development, your go-to-market, and so on. So yeah, so that's the reason. You can still do it through just organic growth, but it will take you longer, and you might not hit the milestones that you want to hit. Like there's a question what the people ask, like being king versus rich. Like, so if you want to be king, you do your organic growth. If you want to be a rich, you get a smaller pie of a larger pie, small piece of a large pie, then you go with the rich approach, just raising money.
Interesting. So it's the comparison of both. And since you've talked about competitors, I'm going to put this question to you from Ramraj. He says, how did you compete with other similar products? You've talked about how you needed to sort of leverage capital to make sure that you became the top player in the market. But how did you compete with these other platforms?
So when we launched the product, we didn't realize there was a competitor in the space, but there was an established competitor. They had an enterprise product, so that was like on-prem. So you have to, when you buy it, it's a long sales process. You have to install it yourself, and we are pure SaaS. So like you sign up within 5 minutes, you're up and running. Basically, literally 5 minutes, you could actually start getting value out of the product. And so that's kind of the first take. Like we just had a better onboarding experience. So if you're building a company, one of the things you should know is that the faster you onboard your customer, the cost CAC, they call it cost to acquire the customer, goes down. That means you have better margins, and so we just had a better just execution in terms of onboarding customers. So we were just getting more and more customers, and we used to get like to a stage where we used to get 1,500 trials a month or so on. So that and some of them become paid customers. So we just had a better onboarding experience, and we had a just better product experience as well. So it's easy to integrate, easy to use. We just focused on, we were very, very like UI focused and how UX focused in terms of how the customer experience our product. So we just focus on that. And then on the other side,
sorry if I can interrupt, Baskar. I think there's a really important theme that you say that I really like. You're saying that there was this kind of laser focus on the customer, because you've mentioned, onboarding, you've mentioned UI. So I feel like that it was really important for you to keep creating super happy customers, not just satisfied customers.
Yeah, and when you have super happy capture, they tell 100 other people, like they tweet about it, and that's how we got to going back to how we get from 10 to 100 million. It's like we just have so many evangelists that told our story, like how one story I actually like to tell is like back in San Francisco, there was a user of a product. He's from Australia, and so he and his spouse were vacationing in San Francisco, and they actually decided to drop by our office. And the wife came to say us thank you, because apparently he runs a team of engineers in Australia, and they didn't have an on-call process. So he gets paged all the time at night, like 2 a.m. he gets woken up. Where now we actually put in a process, because we're using our tool, he doesn't get woken up at 2 a.m. every day, right? So that was a better experience just for the whole family, and she came to thank us. It was those are the things people actually talk about, all that stuff, the impact they have on their life, just having a good process in place.
So I love that. It almost seems like a mandate of your company was like one of the subtle mandate was to create a salesperson outside of your organization, which was customer evangelists. That's fabulous. That was a mandate too. I think that's a very clever thing. Okay, more questions. Naresh Shanmugaraj says, as a product builder, how do you adapt to new technologies and new problem spaces quickly?
So that's in terms of, as a company, you have to have somebody looking out for potential product. Like so for example, PagerDuty is still a single product company, and to become a sustainable longer company, they have to start building new products. And actually, so you need to have a set of teams looking at potential ways to actually expand the product surface in terms of adding new capabilities, but also going into new technologies, integrate them. So it's always, you need to have a team of people, I guess, looking into it. So did I answer the question correctly? I don't know if I answered the question, but it's a balancing act, right? Because you have to also maintain your existing customers. So you have
in a way. What you're saying is that you have to be very careful, because there's a current customer base who's paying the bills.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to have to paraphrase you, but is that what you're saying, that you have to watch out for that? But how do you do it? Do you have someone, from what you're saying, that you have someone within the organization who's sort of watching the landscape to make sure that that you're aware of things that are happening? Would that be accurate?
Yeah. It's not just you need to be able to also, sometimes. So, for example, like one of the existential threat to PagerDuty is the way you think about it. Like, if AI becomes so powerful, like you don't need humans to actually run operations. You could power the. So what's PagerDuty's story on that? I mean, maybe PagerDuty should build that AI, right? So that's kind of they should cannibalize on their business to actually.
So identify the threats.
But also being willing to actually invest in technology that will actually cannibalize the existing business, because that's a hard challenge for people to think about. But anyway, I'm not part of PagerDuty team anymore, so this is just hypothetical. But that's how people like young
PagerDuty people, if you're listening.
If you're Google, like the way you think about Google and Apple and all, they just like they have to, especially Amazon, they will like invest in things that might not work for them. It might actually cannibalize the existing business, but actually that's the future the world is going to go towards, right? So there's just to be ready at that time. They'll be ready when the world gets to that.
So I'm mindful of time here. We've got a ton of questions still. Baskar, are you okay for time?
Yeah.
You're good for time. I'm having a great time, so I'm totally fine for time. And I'm just going to ask the team if one of you can message us to know if it's okay for me to just keep going. Okay, Raj, very basically just texted to say keep going, because I'm learning so much, and I'm sure if I'm as a journalist learning so much, entrepreneurs certainly are. So let's address some of these other questions. There's one from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, where did most of your customer acquisition come from? Was it, search engine optimization, investor connections, word of mouth?
So most early days was word of mouth, and I would say some SEO. So initially, when the product worked with certain tools that were used in the industry. So there's a product called Nagios and Zabbix and Zenos. These are all tools that our customers kind of used. So what we did is we actually created content around that to kind of guide them through, like, how do you do on-call management with that tool? How do you do phone calls with that tool? Things like that, so that somebody, when they search for a tool like that, we end up showing up on the organic search results, and then they actually drive traffic. So we actually have lots of traffic. So for every integration we did, we wrote a custom kind of a landing page with the detailed instructions. So we were organically ranked higher by just Google. So
content creation, though, that's
yeah. So we start, like, our support team. I wrote a lot of articles. It's just a lot of writing, taking screenshots, writing instruction, right? Just getting that content, and it was valuable. All the founders worked on this. Just like, this is one of those things you have to do just being able to write. So that's the thing I learned as a founder. Like, I didn't realize, like, going through high school, even university, how writing was important. I learned to actually be a good writer. Learning better writer than in high school was when actually writing content for others to consume. Where now you're public on the internet, and you don't want to mess it up, right? So that's just another learning step. But yeah, just a lot of content and product led. I guess our growth was product led, and we had ways in the product to kind of. So the way traditionally SaaS is sold, you buy a 10 user license, and that's it, right? And if you want to buy the 11th user, you have to go and call the salespeople and talk to them. And people don't like to do that, like engineers especially. So what we did is, within the product, they could just add the user, and then the salespeople will pay us later kind of model. So they just kept adding users. And then we'll go back to them at the end of the month or end of the quarter, and like, look, you just added these many users. Let's have a conversation. How to reduce the cost, because they have to pay overage fees for those. So, but we just made it easier for them to add those users. Example.
Okay. So, I think we can try to fit in 3 questions here. Let's give it a shot. This is a fascinating question. You're the right person to answer it. Is it worth it to move to San Fran to start your startup? Move to a really hot hub, and it could be something else. Perhaps it's Austin, who knows? But San Fran for now.
So if you asked me 10 years ago, I would say yes. But now I am kind of neutral. And the reason is because San Francisco, the Bay Area, is the highest concentration of talent in terms of just technical talent, but also leadership talent, go-to-market talent, like running companies. It's just you can go find 10 people that built 1,000-person sales team in the Valley, where if you're outside of that, it's harder to find those. And so that's one of the reasons people tend to flock towards San Francisco Bay Area. But now, even with the pandemic, everything, people are willing to open up. Okay, remote is possible. So now you're starting to see, billion-dollar companies that doesn't have a headquarter. Like Coinbase is a company, I don't think they actually have a headquarters. So they are a distributed team now. It's possible, right? So you don't have to get to it, but you have to still find a way to connect to those talent. So either through Reddit groups, Slack, it's just other ways. You have to find those talents other ways. So it's just the medium changed. So you don't have to be a real person, but so it's possible now to build, billion-dollar companies outside of the Valley. It's happening all the time now. So yeah, but I urge people to, if you do want, you just spend time there. It's the culture. It's all about building, right? Building things and things like that. So definitely
what you're saying is that it reduces, that's interesting. One of the points that you've made here that I think really is fascinating is the idea that the concept of ecosystems wrapped around a city may slightly dissolve with the pandemic. But you're saying being in a place like San Fran reduces the friction, right? In the
process. It's here. I have thesis around why isn't there a large companies other than Shopify being built in Canada, and is that after a certain scale, there's no talent to take it to the next level. Luckily for PagerDuty, so I want to make sure that people know PagerDuty is actually run by Jennifer Tejada. She's a professional CEO. She built a great team around it. She took the company public, and finding those kind of talent in Canada would be even difficult. Right. So if you're a startup, you're building a company in Canada or any other part of the world, and you hit to a point, okay, now we are doing, $100 million ARR. How to get to $1 billion? We need the skill set to get to those, to that. You have to bring it from somewhere else. Like if you can't find it in you locally, then you're at a, I guess you're at a stop where now you have to either exit. So that's what happens mostly in Canadian tech space, where they get to a stage and then just someone else buys a company. And that's why, I guess, except for Shopify, right? But that's what been happening in all the other aspects. That's why like the Valley companies go and buy these companies out of the city, because they head to a point where the company need more talent to scale to the next level, and then they might not have that. But it's changing. So I've heard stories where as the past few years, people are actually moving outside of the Valley, moving back to whatever they're like, North Carolina or some other parts of the world. We're actually willing to, because there's companies being built in there, Atlanta, Florida. So it's changing, which is, I think, is a good thing for the world, because now anyone could participate in this economy, right?
Yeah, that's true. That does kind of democratize it to some level. So I'm so sorry to say, I know we still have so many questions, but I'm hoping that the RMNA team can convince you to come for purely a Q&A a couple of days down the road, because I have to say, your insights, I mean, I've listened to a lot of entrepreneurs speak, and Baskar, I think it comes from a deep foundation of having lived through these sometimes painful, sometimes joyful experiences. So I'm hoping someone in the RMNA team, or, will bring you back on for a Q&A, because some of the questions that we're getting indicate to me that these are people that are right in the middle of early stage startups. So your input, even in this kind of a pod format, would be great. And since you're a board member of the organization, you might have very little choice.
No, I like to add, like, because so honestly, I want more of our people to start building companies. We need to just start thinking about the next 100 years. And so that's the way you have to lay foundation, right? So building companies is one way to lay foundation, going into, politics or, journalism in your case, but going into other aspect of some that are traditionally not in our Tamil's purview is actually very important, especially when we become more established society in Canada and all over the world, right? So, so that's why I wanted to, I guess, the high leverage activity that I could do as a person is actually inspire someone else. And so that's why I wanted to come on. Like, it could be done. This just like building something, and to a large scale, and then taking it public. It could be done. It could be done by anyone, right? So you just have to be willing to go through the process and live through it, I guess. But it's possible. That's the thing. There's nothing, especially in this Western world, we have so much freedom where we can spend most of our time on doing like things that are more like personal satisfaction. But I think we also have the freedom to work on something that's far beyond ourselves as well, and there's so much opportunities.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think that there are two value adds. I think you just existing is inspiration, but I think the other thing that I've realized in talking to you over the last hour is the amount of knowledge transfer. So that's the other thing of high leverage activity that you can do. So I really appreciate this chance to talk to you. I'm going to leave with one question. You talk about seeing more people do similar things. So talk to me about how we can increase Tamil representation in the tech space.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to our mental model in terms of our culture, right? Sometimes if you grow up in a Tamil family, people want to either be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, but there's actually tons of other opportunities, especially tech, because tech has now become the foundation for everything else we build. Like 50 years from now, most of your databases will be driven by technology or software. And who's going to build that? Is someone, it has to be a software team that actually does it with the collaboration with the medical community, right? So everything is changing. Everything, especially tech, is changing everything, and this is the right time to go into it. So it's not just software, but it's also biotech, space, engineering, like mechanical engineering, materials engineering. There's like opportunity for so much opportunity just to make impact in this world, and like positive impact in this world. So tech is kind of the foundation for everything. And so as a community, we have to be mindful like this, to invest our time and effort to actually nurture like younger people to get into the space. So as a family, we have, as a parent, I had to support my kids, make sure that they either become educated in terms of how to build software, but they don't have to pursue it, but at least they have the knowledge so that they have to jump in and solve a problem using software. They could do it. What I mean, build software to solve it.
My gosh, Baskar, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you speak again in sort of the same format and hearing more of your wisdom. I am going to now welcome V back to take over from me here, and I'm really grateful to be given the opportunity by Aravane to chat with you. So welcome V back. I believe we have to transfer host privileges to her. Oh, Rajan is the host now. Thank you, Baskar.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Before I let both of you guys go, on behalf of Adavita, we are beyond grateful to even have witnessed this discussion. You guys shared a lot of nuggets that is useful for upcoming entrepreneurs. Thank you, Manjula and Baskar. Manjula, you were elegantly moderated the call, and Baskar, you were absolutely so genuine with all your answers. We would love to thank also at this time our social media partners, Articulate Asia, CTPA, Tamil Women Rising, and all of the Canadian Tamil Student Associations. Last but not least, we would like to thank the entire audience for writing down your questions and tuning in from different time zones from all over the planet. We tried our best to include most of them in this discussion. Hope to see you soon again with our second discussion in March. Thank you once again.